Welcome to the Brew Crew Review Podcast, the show by fans for fans of your Milwaukee Brewers.
All right, Brewer fans, welcome to Brew Crew Review Podcast. Thanks for joining us today. Myself, Craig, is joined by Vince. Vince, how's it going today?
I'm doing great, Craig. Do we have Scotty and Chad with us as well, I assume?
Not here today. Chad, I'm not sure what he's doing. Somewhere possibly, and it's about his birthday time of the year. I think he usually goes out on a Vegas bender for like 10 days or so. So he's probably unconscious somewhere, laying on a poolside. Scott, on the other hand, also who just happens to live near Vegas in Henderson, Nevada, is nowhere near the Strip or wherever Chad is, because that's not his deal. However, he has, I guess the reason he hasn't been coming on podcasts lately, and hopefully we'll have him back on the phone soon, but he's been kind of jostling back and forth he's calling it a darkness retreat. And then he explained the other retreat he goes on. He didn't have a name for it, but I'm calling it the fluffiness retreat. So he's kind of been just jostling back and forth each of the time we have a podcast. He's either in a darkness retreat or a fluffiness retreat. And so he's got a lot of stuff to work through in his life, apparently. So once he's done with that, he'll be back on the podcast. So, but in the meantime, it's you and me, Vince, bringing great commentary about the Milwaukee Brewers to our listeners. So thanks for joining me.
Sounds great. That's good. Good update. Good update. That's good. I think his interns will probably be relieved.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and I think he actually assigned his interns to hang around with Chad this week while he's out there in Vegas. So he wouldn't go anywhere near the Strip or whatever, but apparently he assigned his interns to hang out with his old buddy Chad. So that's pretty cool.
That is good.
So we thank his interns for doing that. Hopefully they can retain their employment this week. All right, so getting into the Milwaukee Brewers. Well, here we go. It's 8 days before the trade deadline? So we'll have some trade deadline talk coming up. But in the meantime, the Milwaukee Brewers are in first place as of this taping. Coming up with a huge 3-game homestand here in the last 3 games we play against the Reds this year, starting this evening. Hoping to attend the game potentially tonight or tomorrow. So I'm pretty pumped up about that. My children are less so, but they'll understand one day. And so, but yeah, pretty big series coming up. Also, I want to just back it up a little bit. This past weekend against the Lyon Braves, unfortunately, we lost the series at home, but we did win the game on Saturday. And Sal Frelick made his major league debut in quite stunning fashion as we won the game. What is your take on the Sal Frelick call up, Vince?
Oh man, Craig, that was an exciting game. We watched on edge every pitch. He was great. A lot of energy, it seemed like, in the ballpark. I've heard a couple other people say this, so it's not an original statement, and I was not there, obviously, but people were comparing it to that game in 2005 when Prince Fielder and Ricky Weeks both hit their first home runs against the Minnesota Twins. I think you were at that game with me. A few of us were there, but a lot of people were comparing the excitement level on Saturday night to that. I think that, fans in Milwaukee have, I think since the early 2000s, gotten really good and very attuned to paying attention to Brewers prospects, which coincides with a big theme on our show for many years, going back to 2004. And I think it's pretty cool that you had so many fans who were engaged enough to know that Sal Frelick is a big deal and that he is the Brewers' #2 prospect and one of the top, 40 prospects in all baseball. And the fact that they were attuned to that and were excited to see him play, I think speaks very well of Milwaukee fans. But his debut itself was obviously awesome. To go 3 for 3 with a sac fly, game-winning RBI in your 4th plate appearance, make 2 outstanding defensive catches, to do all that in your first game. It goes without being said that that's got to be a highlight of a lifetime. I can't even imagine how awesome that would be.
Yeah. No, I mean, something about Sal. I'll just say that obviously the Brewers have broken a couple of offensive rookies here in the last year or so, with obviously Bryce Train make his major league debut, Joey Weimer, Garrett Mitchell, not that long preceding those two. And these guys will probably be staples in our lineups for years to come. But there's just something different about Sal Frelick that I don't know. I can't really put my finger on it. Now, he doesn't necessarily have a higher ceiling than these other guys I'm talking about, but something about him just, I get the feeling that he's going to be a franchise icon type of player, and I could be wrong, and hopefully I'm not. But there's just something about his style of play that I think is going to make him a fan favorite. And at one point, the Brewers had the, I don't want to overhype this too much or put too much pressure on Sal, but at one point, of course, for many, many decades, they had the igniter, Paul Molitor, at the top of their lineup. Sal Frelick, I think I'm going to officially dub the spark plug as the top of our lineup. And he hasn't,
I like it.
he hasn't been, and actually I can't take full credit for that. In fact, he described himself when someone asked him, I think in an interview, to describe himself and his style of play, he said that he's a spark plug with a dirty jersey. So
Yeah.
I like it.
Yep.
So, but anyway, yeah, so there's,
And
I mean,
he's
obviously
looked good at all levels of the minor leagues, Craig. You know, as you know, and we've talked about on the show previously, he's looked good at every level that he's been at. He had some injury problems earlier this year with a torn thumb ligament. Obviously, it limited his production a bit in AAA, but he's looked good all the way around. He looked good in the World Baseball Classic for Team Italy. I think that he is he certainly is a guy that, you know, you can just tell the dugout views him as a leader already. I'm not saying it in his capacity in his, you know, third game coming up here, but I'm just saying that his personality is such that I think the people automatically look to him as an example, and they tend to follow what he does, and that type of energy can't be really replicated easily. So it's great that you've got those types of intangible qualities outside of power, which, you know, could still even be developing. And it's not like he doesn't have any power. It seems like he's got the boxes checked on just about every other facet of the game. So I'll be very excited to see his development, and glad that he's in Milwaukee with kind of a core group of guys like we experienced back in, you know, 2005.
Yeah, and as we saw with the Reds here this season, who have all been bringing up a nice core of young offensive players themselves. Ellie De La Cruz, again, not to put too much pressure on Sal, but the infectious play and enthusiasm and youth and that he's brought to the Reds obviously has propelled them to their standing here as we come in this series against the Brewers. And I think Sal Frelick has the opportunity to have a similar impact. Now, again, I feel like Ellie De La Cruz will eventually be one of the best players in baseball. I'm not putting that much pressure on Sal, but I really think Frelick can become one of the best leadoff hitters probably for like the next 10 years in the MLB. Again, this is really throwing it out there. I mean, we don't know what he's really, but just looking at his track record, he's a first round pick. He's hit well above 300 in most levels of all levels of the minor leagues. And I really just feel like he has this way of getting on base via hit, walk, and making basically creating havoc on the base pass like De La Cruz, and also just defensively giving his all. I think he's going to become a fan favorite really quickly here for the Milwaukee Brewers. So that's kind of exciting. And I hope that his infectiousness and his this really helps the Brewers here as we enter a big stretch drive for the playoff run this year. So I'm really excited for him and his debut, obviously. So it's been a long time coming. He would have been promoted earlier, right after the Garrett Mitchell injury, but believe it or not, he got injured the same day Mitchell did at the major league level. He got injured the same night in the minor leagues, and he was out quite a bit of time. And so now he's finally arrived, and none too soon here for the Milwaukee Brewers and their fans.
Yeah, one other thing that kind of stood out to me with Frelick, just, you know, he had the knowledge to be very complimentary to Milwaukee, which I thought was really neat. He was, you know, he's not from here. He's a guy that is from the East Coast. He's from Massachusetts, and you know, he kept going on and on about how much he's enjoyed Milwaukee in his brief couple of days here, how much he's looking forward to visiting with restaurants. So that speaks to your point of him as a fan favorite. I really do see that happening. I think that, you know, you've got a guy that is good at what he does on the field. He plays hard. He's infectious in terms of his personality, and he's got a real, you know, seemingly a good PR person, at least, or maybe it's just a genuine personality that continually tells good things about the city that he's playing in. He just seems kind of like the all-around winning package for a guy like that. So no, I'm really pumped.
Well, no, he's got a throwback baseball player mentality to him that I really like. So like, I'm looking forward to him. And nothing against these other guys that we brought up, like Bryce Strang's a quality prospect. So is Weimer. So is Garrett Mitchell and all that. But there's something different about this guy, and I guess we'll see as we move forward. So happy to have him in the lineup, and like I said, none too soon for this offense that, again, looking at the numbers throughout the years, anytime this offense scores just 4 runs or more, we're just an incredible team. And we've struggled to do that because of just outside of Yelich's kind of bounce back year, so to speak. everyone else in the lineup is really underachieving almost for the most part, up and down the entire lineup. So that's kind of disconcerting. And so I think that can be addressed at the trade deadline this year. So before we delve into some possible targets for our trade deadline acquisition wish list, so to speak, here we are 1 year later. This was about a week out than the Hader deal went down last year, which drew, I would say, shockwaves rippling throughout Brewer fandom, so to speak. This year, we're almost in the same boat. The only difference is we're in first place again a week before the trade deadline. Last year, the St. Louis Cardinals are right on our heels. This year, it's the Cincinnati Reds. Besides those two things, what is different this year, in your opinion, than last year, with as far as just the Milwaukee Brewers and their outlook on postseason play?
Well, we haven't traded our all-star closer yet, so that's good.
Yeah, no, I can't imagine what would happen if Devin Williams gets traded in the next week. I don't think that would go over too well.
I mean, to answer your question, on the field, I do think this team is a little bit more talented than last year's team, probably because of the influx of younger talent. I think one of the understated aspects of that is Bryce Terang's defense. I've been really, really happy with his defensive play. I know his offensive numbers have not been the best this year, but I think that he has really solidified things defensively up the middle. I really like that. I think that just some of the energy with the younger guys in the clubhouse. I think that our starting pitching has held pretty firm despite Brandon Woodruff being injured for most of the year. The timing of him coming back from injury, hopefully, now that he's starting to make some rehab appearances for the Wisconsin Timber Rattlers this past week, which is another news item I'm sure we're going to discuss a little bit more. I think that could give us cause for some optimism. So I think that the organization hopefully learned last year that if nothing else, the fan backlash of trading a guy like Josh Hader in a pennant race is not good. And you can argue about the talent level that we received back in both the trade and the follow-up trades, talking about getting a guy like Contreras because of Ruiz, who we acquired because of Hader. I know that there's been some reanalysis of the trade just recently in the past week from some of our colleagues in the media, like Ken Rosenthal. But I still think that when you're talking about an organization, especially one like the Brewers, who has 8 playoff appearances in 54 seasons, that you just go for it every time that you have the opportunity to go for it. So I would be shocked and disappointed yet again if the Brewers were to be sellers at the deadline while sitting in first place. I mean, even if we were to have a terrible week against, the Reds and Atlanta on the road, I still can't imagine us being in the position to sell in the next week.
No, I mean, outside of us literally losing every game between now and the trade deadline, there's no way we're going to change course. I don't know what course we're on, but we're winning the division, and this is the same as was true last year. And
yeah, but we were sellers last year somehow. That's why I'm very hesitant to give the organization the benefit of the doubt at the deadline until they prove me wrong. And I hate to be a naysayer. I'm not generally a negative person, as you know. It's very, very, very frustrating to see this team's deadline approach year after year continuously come up short. And I think that it stems from several factors. One is I think that there was an element of David Stearns' approach. And again, he's a great GM, but I think there was an element of him that almost tried to be kind of too cute, if that makes sense, with, trying to do too much in certain ways. And I think that sometimes you just have to simplify it to the point where we know that we're a good team. We have to get better at certain aspects to continue to be a great team or to be a great team. And I think that in this case, it's obviously the offense. So if we're not out there looking for bats, I'd be very disappointed. And I'll be very disappointed if Mark Atanasio is not willing to add some salary for the second half. And quite frankly, I say the same thing going into next year too, with the crop of guys that we have who are not yet free agents. So we still have a very good team intact going into next year. So I'd be looking at guys who are either rentals for the second half or guys who are under control for this year and next year.
The reason I feel this year is very important for Brewer fans and for this current team is obviously the elephant in the room is the fact that not this offseason, but after the 2024 offseason, we will, next year is the last year that we have control over a huge core of our team. And that's Corbin Burns, who's a free agent after next season, Brandon Woodruff, the same, Willie Adames, the same. So out of those three guys, those are really important guys if we're going to make a run deep in the postseason to have on our team. And beyond next year, or that might not be possible. So because of that, I think we need to push all our cards to the middle of the table and make a huge run for it this postseason. If it doesn't work out, I think the Brewers then have to sit back and identify which one of these guys we can afford to keep or are willing to stay for whatever money we're willing to pay them, and then possibly look to deal two of the other three, unfortunately. I mean,
well, I don't even think that we need to do that, Craig. I mean, I disagree with that a little bit, because I think that we can afford, I think that we go for it next year too. I think that you keep this core together with Woodruff and Burns as two of the top pitchers in baseball when healthy, and you make a run for it again. Like, what are we waiting for? We've got these guys for another season after this year too. I would definitely be buyers this deadline with guys, like I said, that are going to be under control for both this year and hopefully next year too. If not, rentals are fine. But I would certainly be looking to add next year and making next year be an all-in year the entire season. I mean, I don't know when you're going to do it if you're not going to do it when you've got this type of rotation. I just don't. And to trade away guys right now for prospects or whoever else amongst that core group, I think that you can trade them at the deadline next year if we're not in it for some reason. But, with the Cardinals being weaker and the Cubs not being there yet, and the Pirates still not being there yet, and the division being what it is, yes, the Reds are talented, but I do think that they're beatable, and they're still very young. I think that this is our window. This year and next year especially are our window, and then you do what you can to rebuild with good drafts and whatever you have to do, and signing maybe one of the two guys at least going into 2025. But this year I'm worried about 2023, and I'd go for it.
Yeah, no, those are fair points. Like I said, we don't have to, but just the normal operation of a small market team, like a team like ours, it's hard for me to see us not, letting all three of those guys hit free agency without getting any compensation for them. But like you said, it's an option that could be on the table if we go that route. I just don't see it happening. But obviously, if we're in first place this year with those guys still on the roster, I would be all, like you're saying, I'd be all for it for the most part. I mean, at some point you got to go for it. We want to win a World Series in this town, that's for sure. So, with that being said, thinking of the names out there to possibly, the Brewers, obviously, the advantage that they have is they already have a really solid rotation and bullpen with some depth. We probably add a bullpen arm, but for the most part, everyone knows that we're looking for bats. Obviously, at least one, possibly two or three, to add to this team to really make it, to improve it. Now you look at the other contending teams, almost all of them are going to be looking for mostly pitching upgrades. And so the Brewers are at an advantage where they're the ones that are most likely, are going to have their pick of the litter with the offensive guys that are out there available for trade. So I guess before I rattle off a list of potential targets, the Brewers bats, is there anyone out there that you've had your eye on as far as a potential target, or someone you'd like for the Brewers to go for or to acquire?
I don't know that I'm going to mention any specific names yet. I probably should. But I think that these next couple of games actually are going to make or break a lot of teams that could be sellers or could be buyers even. You've got very few teams that are truly out of it. So I think a lot of things are still yet to be determined this week. We know that teams like the Royals are going to be sellers, but we're not sure about teams, maybe like the White Sox. I think that they're going to be sellers, but maybe like the Mets. I don't know. I think that there's going to be teams that are going to have to make some very tough decisions this week, whether or not they are going to kind of stick in it for this year or if they're going to retool. So that's going to really deepen that list of names, I think, after play this week, or after play these next couple of games.
Okay, yeah. So I agree with that point that there might be some more teams to add to the mix as far as people turning from buyers to sellers, and potentially the other way. But I think there are a certain number of teams that are definitely identified as the teams looking to sell. You've got the Nationals for sure. You've got the White Sox, most likely their season is done. Obviously A's, Royals, Tigers. Well, actually, even the Tigers, I think are only like 6 games out of first, and that were probably weak.
They're 7 games back right now. I think that the White Sox are 12. The Tigers are 7. Scotty's interns are hitting me something. Yeah, the White Sox are 12 games back. Detroit is 7 games back. Kansas City is 25 games in the AL Central. So, yeah, the Oakland's obviously a seller. I think that I think that Seattle could be interesting just because, and that's one of the teams I was kind of referring to with a make or break week. And one of the reasons is their record. They're only a game over 500, but they're also in fourth place, in that division with two very good teams ahead of them at least. What I also know though about the Mariners is that they're always very active. So I'm kind of looking at the Mariners as being a sleeper team to be a seller, or at least do some creative things at the deadline, given those two factors.
Well, I'm sure Mr. DePoto will definitely be pulling off some trades. He won't be sitting idly on his hands, that's for sure. But and okay, so I'll throw out the first target from the Mariners that's on my list, and that'd be first right-handed hitting first baseman, third baseman Ty France. Obviously, the Brewers have holes at the corners, as it's pretty well documented. Obviously, Rowdy Tellez, I should say, is coming back, left-handed hitting, hopefully from injury very soon. The problem with he's really struggled this year and probably should only go back to being a platoon bat against right-handers only. So that what really leaves us a need, and we've been struggling against left-handed pitching all year, especially. Yeah. So really adding a right-handed bat makes perfect sense to me. So really, Ty France being a right-handed hitter, really quality hit tool on him. Not that much power, but I really like him. He would be someone I'd be interested in acquiring. But again, I don't know that they'll be willing to sell him and what the price would be. So throwing out a couple other names, just going with right-handed hitting first baseman slash third base on my list. You've got Patrick Wisdom on the Cubs. I'm not interested in him. Jake Berger on the White Sox. He still has a number of years of team control. Has kind of had a mini breakout year. He might not even be available. One guy I am really interested in, and so CJ Cron on the Rockies, first baseman. He seems like a really quality name and bat, but I'm not a fan of his. I do really like Joey Meneses of the Nationals, who plays right-handed hitting first baseman. He plays outfield as well, but he'd be someone I'd be interested in.
Yeah.
He'd be someone I'd be interested in. And then also the one guy I really love that is definitely on the trade block because he's blocked at the major league level, has had his struggles with strikeouts, but has immense power, in my opinion. That's Bobby Dahlbeck from the Red Sox. He's right-handed hitting. He plays first and third. I just feel like we match up pretty well with them. They're really looking for pitching. I feel like we could possibly land him for someone like Hauser or possibly even a healthy Lauer if he can show himself healthy between now and then. I don't know. Or possibly some prospects. I don't know. So he might even be like a straight up swap, change of scenery option to trade Keston Hiura maybe for him. I don't know if it's probably going to cost more than that to get him, but that's the name I like. A couple of switch hitters on corner infielders are also likely potential targets are Carlos Santana, switch hitter, first baseman for the Pirates. A veteran there who knows how to get on base, but again, his skills are declining. A younger guy that I think Tom Carter, TC wanted us to say that he's our number one potential target, and that's Jeimer Candelario, third base, right-hand hitting third base, switch hitting the third baseman for the Nationals. He's on the final year of his deal, and obviously they're looking to sell. We've seen the matchup perfectly for him, but I'm not huge on him as far as, he'd be a nice acquisition, but whatever it costs, I'm not sure that he's a difference-making type player. I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on those names I threw out there? Any other ones that like pique your interest?
I'm not as down on CJ Cron as you are. I know that you haven't liked him for a while. The Brewers had been linked to him potentially as a free agent a couple of years ago. I remember having that conversation with you then. He's gotten a little bit hotter as of late. He seems, unfortunately, I think, like somebody that the Brewers will try to target. I don't hate him. I don't love him. He's just sort of a guy. He sort of reminds me of Darren Ruff, to be honest, in certain aspects of his game. But at this approach, I think that the Brewers, at least being aggressive enough to go after somebody, could be of interest. There's been some talk of Mike Moustakas from the Angels. I don't really know what he brings that we currently don't have, but he's hit a little bit better with the Angels, I guess, he did with the Rockies earlier in the year. Again, I think that there's going to be a lot that kind of emerges in the next, couple days.
Last
where
year,
you've
the
got a lot.
acquisition, Eduardo Escobar is probably available, and the
Yeah,
year before that, Andrew McCutcheon, he's probably available too. Not sure if we
yeah,
can.
that's true. Well, McCutcheon was a free agent going into the year, but yeah, he Escobar was 2021's deadline acquisition. He's already been traded once this season from the Mets to the Angels, but yeah,
Yeah.
he probably is available at this point. Oddly enough, the Angels have both Moustakas and Escobar as their deadline acquisitions so far within the last month here. So they started early, I guess, to probably bring themselves up to the deadline to see if they are going to be contenders or not. It's hard for me to think that the Angels. I know that they're trying to take advantage of their Ohtani window, but it's hard for me to think that the Angels are going to play well enough in the second half here to overtake Houston or the Rangers. I just don't
Trout's
see the
injury
talent.
too. I think Trout might be out.
Yeah, exactly.
I really feel he's probably out for the year with his injury. So, I mean, that's got to factor into it. But I'm going to go on record as I'm going to say that Ohtani does not get traded. As ridiculous as that sounds, and as stupid as it probably is for the Angels, I just feel like what it would actually take to land them is going to be cost prohibitive for any team that's really willing to go for it this year that's in position.
Yeah.
Like usually a team like the Yankees, if they're in first, would probably be like, oh yeah, let's just do it. I'll give them whoever. But I just don't feel like there's a team at the forefront that's going to be willing to pay up to get him on a short term, for the stretch run, including unfortunately your Milwaukee Brewers. But
that'd be the dream, right?
But I do think there'll be some pretty big names moved at the deadline. But I think a lot of them are going to be probably pitchers. You're looking at like Lucas Giolito almost for sure will get moved. Marcus Stroman almost for sure since he's a pending free agent, and guys like Lance Lynn and so I think there's going to be some pitchers moving around, and unfortunately some of the teams competing with us, like the Reds, are probably going to acquire a name or two as far as the rotation goes. And so that's scary. So, I mean, I think we really need to do our part in bringing a big bat here in some fashion. And maybe it's someone that's completely off the radar. That's usually how they operate, the Brewers, where like we just didn't see it coming. And one name I'll throw out there as a potential fit, believe it or not, from the Cardinals, guy who's a young guy who doesn't really have a spot, but I think he has a bright future, and that's Nolan Gorman. He actually came up as a third baseman. He hits left-handed, but he plays third and second base, and I think he could be a strong third baseman of the future for us, but we'll see. And then, of course, there's even some right-handed hitting veteran bats that are just sitting out there on the waiver wire, so to speak, as free agents, and that's still Nelson Cruz and Will Myers. But obviously, if we had interest in those, we would have already done something.
And we've talked about those two names several times on this show over the past couple of years, and it's just pretty clear at this point the Brewers have zero interest. I mean, we could have had them for nothing at the trade deadline last year. We could have had them as free agents. We could have done a lot at this point to bring them in, but I just don't think we're that interested.
Yeah. And again, it seems like we don't need outfielders, but this is another thing where the Brewers will probably like trade for an outfielder and then switch someone back to the corner. Like potentially even Yelich. I mean, Yelich could be moved to first base if we want to add an outfielder or something. Yep. I don't know that we should do that in season, but especially with how well he's hitting, but that's an option. So we'll see what happens. Whatever it is, it'll be probably a surprise, and it probably won't be anyone we named here. So
correct. Yeah. Do you think that you could see Joey Wiemer as a first baseman in the future, given his height? I know he's a good defensive outfielder, so I wouldn't necessarily do that, but I'm kind of curious. I had a conversation with somebody.
I think that's he could very well end up in about 10 years, assuming his career goes that long. But I just don't think, with how athletic he is and what he offers in the outfield for defense, I just don't see why a team would do that. That seems kind of foolish just to fit a team. But you never know.
Only to move his bat, or to keep his bat in the lineup. If you can add an outfielder, for instance, that can hit, you don't want to limit yourself if that guy can only play outfield. I just wonder. I think that Wiemer is probably athletic enough to do it. Any profiles as being a guy, I think, as his back continues to mature, that profiles as a first base type. So could be interesting.
It does beg the question, though, like at some point real soon here, the Brewers are going to have an outfield logjam. Obviously, Jackson Trio is probably ready like within the next year to be a starting outfielder. And then you've got Mitchell coming back from injury next year. You've got Joey Wiemer. You've got Frelick, who I'm sure will solidify himself as a starter this year. And then you've got Christian Yelich under contract for a long time still. So that's 5 names for 3 spots. Maybe one of the guys might have to identify as a young guy that we could actually move to get another there could be like a prospect for prospect trade. Like we trade one of our outfield prospects for a corner infield prospect or something like that.
Yeah, I did notice that Weimer hasn't played the last 2 games. I wonder if he's being sat just in case he's on the move. But I would be shocked if the Brewers did operate like that. But I did notice that he hasn't played in 2 games, not even as a pinch hitter. So that is kind of interesting. And our anonymous source, Tom Carter, and some of our colleagues like Adam McKelvey were talking to Craig Counsell about this yesterday, and he said it was, quote, a baseball-related decision, as in it was not an injury, it was nothing like that, it wasn't a personal thing, he didn't ask for a day off. So he just said it was a baseball move. But interesting, right?
That is interesting, definitely. So we'll see. I mean, so who knows? I think whatever move is going to happen, and hopefully multiple moves, I think it'll be a surprise. Obviously, we can speculate on bullpen arms. There's so many out there that, and there's plenty of John Curtises of the world or guys that were just not on our radar thinking. But obviously,
Daniel Norris, I think the ghost of trade deadlines past in our bullpens have always been great.
It's just last year adding Rosenthal and Bush that didn't work out too well, but they somehow were convinced that those 2 guys would cover for Hader along with Taylor Rogers.
Taylor Rogers, yeah.
What can you do? Oh, I was actually just handed a note by one of Scott's interns, Jade here, who I thought was poolside with Chad, but apparently not. Apparently, this is just breaking news since our podcast started. The Brewers have outright released Jason Alexander and also Ramiel Tapia, who they has elected free agency. I guess they designated from assignment yesterday. He's now elected free agency. So unfortunately, those 2 guys are no longer going to be Brewers. So
I'm seeing it too. I think Alexander is in AAA. I think he got outrighted fully to AAA. He had been down there on a rehab assignment, and I think that was the Brewers not putting him back onto the 40-man roster where he did start the year. He was injured, so they could keep him on the 40-man because of his status on the 60-day DL. So I think this is kind of a procedural move. I got the same note here, but
I think you're right. Okay, yeah. So he still has options available. I wasn't aware.
He's still at Nashville with the Nashville Sound. Tapia will be a free agent. Tapia was obviously only a Brewer for a limited amount of time. Looking over the notes here, he had played a grand total of 20 games at the Brewers, 61 plate appearances, hit 173 with a 267 OBP. So Tapia's Brewer career was not a great one. He did have a couple big moments. He had 2 home runs. I think that one of his home runs was in Philadelphia in kind of a crucial moment. So yeah, he was a fill-in guy to begin with. I never really expected Tapia to be a long-term solution here with the Brewers in the outfield. So best of luck to him wherever he goes.
Yeah, and we're hoping to maybe have at least one more podcast before the trade deadline to maybe give you some updates on what other teams are doing. I know the Braves already just traded for a couple bullpen arms today, so everyone's still trying to improve. What I just want to throw out there as a last subject for this podcast to you, Vince, is what if you're the Milwaukee Brewers front office, what do you do with the 2 players that we acquired in the Grisham Zach Davies trade, and that's Louis Urias, who has been sent down to AAA and not hitting well, and Eric Lauer, also part of that deal, who's been really useful for us at the major league level, but is also now coming back from injury, and he's a free agent at the end of next year as well. So unfortunately, if he was fully healthy, he'd be a candidate to possibly move. And then also Keston Hiura, that he's been hitting well at AAA, but really. Yeah, there's no place for him, in my opinion, on our roster moving forward, just because he can't play a position. So he seems right. I guess my ask to you, I guess, is what is your opinion if one of those guys were just asked to be included in a trade to facilitate a trade? Not saying that these are all change of scenery candidates, but like what value do these guys even have? And also I hate selling low on guys either when they're injured or their value is down when it comes to trading, but really, in my opinion, what are your take on if any of those 3 guys you'd prefer to not trade, I guess?
Well, first things first, talking about where they're most valuable, I think that Urias, I've said this many, many, many times, Urias to me has always been valuable, but valuable as a platoon player. I've never once viewed him as a starting third baseman. I don't view him as a starting second baseman. I view him as a utility player option, and that's not to comment on his talent level as much as to say, I think that he's valuable because he plays multiple positions. So I would keep Urias probably out of that group. But boy, is he struggling right now. And I don't know what it is. It's going to, what it's going to take. I mean, the guy, I think he's hitting 230 something in AAA. And we can have Scotty's interns check on that, but he really has not merited a call back to the major leagues by any stretch of the imagination at this point. And you can see that, the Brewers agree, because we're keeping guys like Andrew Monasterio up at the big leagues and calling up guys like Jahmai Jones instead of Luis Urias. So, yeah. So anyways, to answer your question, I'd probably rephrase it looking at some of these numbers. I think Hira is probably the guy that we want to see up next. I've always liked Hira. I think that, that bat has always played well. He's got, a tendency to strike out. But I would out of those three, Hira would actually be my answer. Urias in a platoon role could be valuable still. I would not have him as a starter ever in terms of one position. Eric Lauer, and I'm sure that you're tracking on this, but he has not only been sent to the Nashville Sounds, but he has walked away from that team. And it's a bit of a mystery as to what is going on.
Okay.
So Eric Lauer has not thrown a pitch in over a month, I believe it is, 5 weeks in AAA, and has been put on a special designation. He's not on the disabled list, but he is listed as something like restricted, unable to pitch, but it's not a suspension. He's just it's a temporary inactive list, I think is the exact terminology.
Wow. So, well, whatever's going on there, I'm sure you can scratch him off the trade list then, because
yeah, he's not going anywhere, man. He hasn't even reported to Nashville yet, apparently. So, or he did, and then he walked away from the team. So he is. I'm sure that the Brewers know where he is, but it's a situation that is not leading him to be on the disabled list. So it apparently is not medical. So something is going on, but I don't know what. So we'll have to ask our anonymous source, Tom Carter, about that, and hopefully have an answer for you by our next podcast. But yeah, that's something.
Yeah, just go with the anonymous source. You don't have to. Just don't say his name. Yeah.
Okay, but next time we can have a segment by him about the Lauer situation and maybe get some answers. This happened somewhat similarly with Ray Black a few years ago. He was on a restricted list, still is technically, but Ray is out of the organization now and doing his own thing, but he's still listed on the roster. So there's some weird stuff going on. I don't really know what it is, but we'll hopefully have an answer for you by our next show. But yeah, Eric Lauer is not even reported to be with the AAA Nashville Sounds at this point.
So just to be clear, the other two guys, the guy you'd most like to keep is Hira or
yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, I was not clear before. Yeah, Keston Hira would be the guy that I'd keep. Luis Urias, my argument is that he would still have value, but only as a utility guy. Somebody playing multiple positions. So I don't dislike him to say, oh, he couldn't come back and do something in Milwaukee. I just think that he's at the point where we can definitely not rely on him as a starting third baseman.
And maybe he would be a good candidate for my Bobby Dahlbeck wish list because, as you know, the Red Sox have too many corner infielders, and they are kind of devoid and have been trying out and cycling through middle infielders like we've been doing corner outfielders. So that seems like maybe a good match. Maybe Luis Urias straight up or Bobby Dahlbeck, but. Again,
change the scenery for Luis. Yeah, for sure.
Fortunately, I'm not in charge of the Brewers, so we'll see what they come up with. I'm sure there's a Jonathan Scope out there. Oh, actually, the actual Jonathan Scope is on the waiver wire too.
Another ghost of trade deadlines past, and I will just say that Jonathan Scope was acquired at the 2018 trade deadline, and that was actually the best one ever in the Stearns era. Was Jonathan Scope's year? He was clearly the low bar of that trade deadline, but we also did get Xavier Cedeno and Curtis Granderson and Joaquin Soria and Mike Moustakas. So that was I think by far, and Gio Gonzalez, that was by far the most active trade deadline we've ever had with the Stearns era, and the best in my opinion, even with he definitely missed on Jonathan Scope, but I think he hit on the other guys at least.
Well, I'm hoping for another really active deadline, hopefully more productive, or a productive one like 2018. I'll take that even with one dud in there or something. But yeah, I think we need to shuffle some cards. Let's just put it that way. Offense.
Yep, I agree, especially given the state of the rest of the division. I think next year we go for it. I'm all in.
Absolutely. So, all right. Well, I think that's going to wrap it up for today. Thanks for joining us, Brewer fans.
Yeah, awesome. Really quick, Craig. Let me just sorry to interrupt. Let me just throw out a plug. Give us a follow on Twitter, Brew Review 1. Continue to send us your questions, Brew Crew Podcasts with an S at gmail.com. Scotty will get to those when he returns from his vacation or whatever he's doing. And yeah, we will get to those hopefully on our next episode with Scott.
All right. Well, yeah, pretty excited about this next 10 days of Brewer baseball will be pretty exciting. Obviously, the huge series coming up against the Reds, and then you've got the trade deadline, and then yeah, it's gonna be awesome. So stay tuned and get out to the ballpark. And yeah, stay classy, Matt Arnold, and go Brewers.
Sounds good. Go Brewers.